Alrighty, y'all. Let's take a look at last week of May. First time we've done a theme quiz. I'm Eli Robinson, Chief Trivia Officer of Water Cooler Trivia. Each week we take a look at the quizzes, the questions that we put out for America for a given week, see how people did, see how they did versus what we expected them to do, etc., and kind of go over each of the questions. Always, if you have any comments, any questions, you know where to find us. Would love to kind of engage on what's going on in the trivia world. Let's start with the quiz taking stats at the highest level. So I had 648 users take the quiz this week. Average of 6.65, median of 7. It was okay. I think ultimately we want those numbers to be slightly higher. There were a few questions that were just slightly harder than we thought they were going to be. This is the first week that we have the breakdown of how people did across the entire quiz. I think what we see up here is like exactly what we would expect. Quite a few perfect scores, but this is where we want to be living for the most part. I think the more surprising part are these answers down here. The engagement, likely for the people who are getting between 1 and 4, they're probably not even finishing the quiz. They're just taking it and saving their answers, perhaps intending to come back, but don't really know. But this is, if you got an 8, 9, or 10, it looked like you were doing pretty well this week. All right, so let's take a look at question number 1. All of us here at Water Cooler Trivia headquarters are pouring one out for the end of one of the most notable daytime talk shows of all time. You may see that we have had trouble getting this news off our mind as we were writing this week's questions. What is the first name of talk show host DeGeneres, whose eponymous show is coming to an end on May 26, 2022 after 19 seasons on the air? So a lot of things happening here. Obviously, question number 1, it's a very long question. And what we're doing here is setting up the theme for the week, which was awesome, right? It says, you may see that we had trouble getting this news off our mind when writing this week's questions. I reckon that quite a few people who took the quiz this week probably did not even realize that there was some sort of clue between this and what was going on in the rest of the game. But obviously for this one, 98% correct. The answer is, of course, Ellen. Great wrong answer. Someone guessed Portia de Rossi, which is hilarious because, of course, Portia de Rossi is in the photo that we used. I would imagine that person was trolling when they guessed it, although I really did enjoy seeing that. So what we, when we were writing this week's quiz, it was the first time where we were like, hey, this is not just a consortium of 10 questions, but ultimately we want this to work in tandem with each other to kind of maximize what was going on. So let's go to question number 2. According to the World Atlas, the 5 most popular fruits in the world are tomatoes, bananas, apples, oranges, and what pink fruit with a green rind known for its seed spitting contest? Okay, so the answer is, of course, watermelon. Would have expected a 96, 97%er here. We got an email in this week that somebody said that the pink threw them off. And it started a really long conversation amongst us here at Water Cooler as to whether or not watermelons were pink or red on the inside. I don't think pink was so misleading that it would have caused such a significant number of people, because it was a fruit that was pink on the inside, speed sitting, green rind. At some point there's enough clues here, but I will say that I was surprised to see this number where it was. So the answer to question number 1 was Ellen. The answer to question number 2 was watermelon. Question number 3. Famously sported by award-winning thespians Hunt, Mirren, and Hayes, what H word was the second most popular name for American girls during the 20th century? So here's another one that we would have expected 95% plus, including a picture of Helen Mirren there on the right. So the answer is Helen. A lot of opportunities to get this question right? You could have known Helen Hunt, you could have known Helen Mirren, you could have known Helen Hayes. And when you think about, you could have gotten it through the, Social Security data, most popular name kind of thing. So lots of Haley's, Hannah, Harriet, etc. People who clearly did not kind of get attached to what was going on with the actresses. And then finally, as we talk about this metagame, the fact that all the questions were connected, as you'll see, as we start to continue to put this one together, number 1 is Ellen, number 2 is watermelon, number 3 is Helen. Spoke to our CTO this week. He said he's just not very good with actors and actresses. Which, yeah, perhaps there's just a, blind spot in some sort of people's trivia knowledge about actresses. All right, number 4, criminal justice analogy time. Misdemeanant is to someone convicted of a misdemeanor, as what F word is used to describe a criminal who commits a more serious offense. So this one's interesting because I had never heard the word misdemeanant. It's clearly not used particularly frequently in the English vernacular. I can't think of any time you'd call someone a misdemeanant. However, the crime more serious than a misdemeanor is a felony, and so the F word would be felon. This is one of those where it was actually higher than we expected. Analogies sometimes confuse people, and you have this kind of strange thing where we're including a word that people don't know. But 96% of this, 96% of people got this one right. One thing I will say is going back to kind of how ordering matters. So if the answer, if rather it was a felon is someone who commits a felony as what is to someone who commits a misdemeanor, I think you would see, lower than 10% correct. And this is where kind of when you're crafting trivia and you're thinking about this stuff, you ultimately have a lot of power in words, right? And so you do a little teaching and saying that there's this word misdemeanant that you may know or not know, but here it is, and then you kind of cue into felon. So I'm assuming at this point y'all are starting to pick up on what the quiz theme was, but answer number 1, Ellen, watermelon, Helen, and now felon. Question number 5, just fill in the what. Before it blew up in Guardians of the Galaxy, weddings were a hot spot to hear Elvin Bishop's twangy classic, Fooled Around and Blank Blank Love. I fooled around and fell in love. I would imagine that if you have been to a wedding in the last 35, 40 years, you've probably heard that song. 81%, that's generally around where we would have expected this one to be. It is in the, pop culture as well as being kind of zeitgeisty with Guardians of the Galaxy because it was on that mixtape in the movie. Interesting question about what to do with the answer fall in. Fooled around and fall in love. So in a normal week, we would probably count fall in because in some ways fall in can be very much interpreted as a misspelling from fell in. However, given that, at least so far as you've probably been able to see, the answers have been Ellen, watermelon, Helen, felon, and now fell in. There probably was an additional level of scrutiny that we would want to give to this question. I will give a quick shout out to Russell in Los Angeles, who answered what is Shout by the Isley Brothers. Clearly a man who enjoys that type of wedding ballad. I will say that the idea of the song title from Elvin Bishop being Fooled Around and What is Shout by the Isley Brothers Love, probably not particularly accurate, but I enjoyed the guess nonetheless. Okay, question number 6, and this is interesting because you get to one where our quizmaster thought that people were really going to do poorly on this. Ranked 25th in the 2022 U.S. News & World Report undergraduate rankings and first in artificial intelligence programming language and information and technology management graduate programs. Pittsburgh's most prestigious university is named what after two capitalist families who endowed the institution in the early 1900s, and then there is a picture of Andrew Carnegie and a picture of, I believe, Andrew, but there were a couple different Mellon brothers. So the answer is, of course, Carnegie Mellon. So there are a lot of different ways to cut at this. It's a Pittsburgh university. It's robber barons. We tried to cue that it would be good at tech. So if you know anything about Carnegie Mellon, you would see the programming language and information and technology management stuff. I was kind of more bullish on America's ability to get this one right, and it was very impressive. Like I said, our quizmaster really had this as not particularly good. We got great robber baron combos, like tons of Rockefeller, Carnegie, Morgan, all these great, really amazing names. I loved that somebody guessed Johns and Hopkins. I thought that was a fantastic guess because it clearly understood what we were going for. But my favorite part of why that guess is so funny is the answer. Johns Hopkins is a person. Johns is his first name and Hopkins is his last name. So obviously the university is in Baltimore, but like it's more of just like a very entertaining feature to me that like how you see people's brains working. And so now, pretty obvious what the theme is when you have Ellen, watermelon, Helen, felon, and Carnegie Mellon. So like all the answers ended up rhyming with Ellen. We don't actually know how many people were able to pick up on that. And going back to the stats, like there weren't like some like massive litany of perfect scores. So even if you did pick up on it, it didn't mean that you were going to be able to like get it all right. But pretty interesting to see that we were able to put that together, and it seemed that people really enjoyed it. All right, question number 7. Keep your voice down. The first person in American history to lead the Federal Reserve, the White House Council on Economic Advisors, and currently the Department of the Treasury is Janet who? Okay, normally asking Janet Yellen trivia is probably not a very good idea. She, while very important to the way that our country functions now and the way that the U.S. has functioned for quite an extended period of time, she's definitely not a household name. So what do we see here, right? Keep your voice down. So that's the Yellen clue. Bad jokes, but that's hopefully you come here for this. There's a picture of her. It rhymes with Ellen. I would have expected this number to be lower. The fact that it was 68% I thought was pretty dang good. So kudos to everybody out there who follows the Fed or whatever it may be. All right, on the Mount Rushmore of European explorers of the New World, you'll find what Portuguese navigator famous for leading the first global circumnavigation and ultimately getting the strait at the southern tip of Chile named after him. So this is, of course, Ferdinand Magellan, which rhymes with Yellen and Ellen, watermelon, and all that kind of stuff. We got a great number of explorers. It would be interesting, once again, to know. I think this answer would be significantly lower if all the answers didn't rhyme. Plenty of Da Gamas and Columbuses and all that kind of stuff. So, really, pretty standard world history question. Enough clues in here. 69% is great for what we would be expecting. Question number 9. Talk about a Big Mac. What man's biography includes leading the Army of the Potomac against the Confederacy in 1862, losing to Abraham Lincoln in the election of 1864, and being elected governor of New Jersey in 1877? So I was stunned that this was this high. This person, while theoretically a participant in American history in the mid-1800s, is definitely not a name that people know. This is, of course, George McClellan. So, there's a couple explanations for what could be happening here, right? As I wrote here on this slide, bafflingly high. The rhyming could have really played in, right? So like people could, there's only so many words that rhyme with Ellen. So you could have gotten down here, there were a couple people who guessed Llewellyn, which isn't like a bad guess, but like McClellan is like just, you're running out of things. So you could have a ton of people who just guess based on that. Or quite frankly, Occam's razor might say that there were plenty of people who were cheating. But this was kind of like the big payoff question for the week. For the people who got 10, it would have been very impressive for them to get this one right. And finally, question number 10. The fancy hats of Magneto from the X-Men saga and Gandalf from the Lord of the Rings trilogy were donned by what classy alum of UK's Royal Shakespeare Company? Okay, so this is an interesting one because Ian McKellen is known primarily to global audiences for movies. X-Men and Lord of the Rings were the kind of big franchises that he spent, kind of helped headline. What's interesting is when you do research on Ian McKellen, you find out that he's actually much more known in the inner circles as a stage actor. And so this is kind of like use an opportunity to teach something. We clearly could have left out the UK's Royal Shakespeare Company. I would imagine for most people that was a pure throwaway, the fact that he was involved with that. But 72% correct. By this point, I think there were lots of people who actually understood what was going on with the rhyming. And so there were just tons and tons of answers that rhyme with Ellen that were just completely off the walls, obviously being the 10th question. But we're really happy with this week. I think a lot of people really like the payoff of understanding what was going on with the theme. The correctness, like I said, we probably wanted it to be a little bit easier, but not by a particularly significant margin. And so, if you have any questions, comments, want to learn a little bit more about what we do at Water Cooler, have your own kind of takes on why people would or would not have gotten particular questions, we would love to hear from you. So I'm at Chief Trivia Officer here on Twitch, on TikTok. You can find us on LinkedIn and all the other social medias at our watercoolertrivia.com. Alrighty, until next week. See you later.